You can use the compare, equals, and compare to methods of a string in order to compare the contents of two strings. Because of the nature of strings, comparisons can be quite complex, but C# and .NET have you covered. The compare method takes as parameters the two strings that you want to compare. The method returns a negative number if the first string is less than the second, 0 if they're equal, and a positive number if the first string is greater than the second. And here's some code that shows how you can use this method. So I have two strings. Person 1 is Carol Kleckner, person 2 is Don Kiley. And then I used the compare method of the string object. So this is an instance method of the string class. And I passed to it the two strings that I want to compare. Now, the order does matter here because it's going to compare the first string to the second string and then return a value of whether this is less than person 2 or equal to person 2 or greater than person 2. So that's going to affect the value that is returned by this function. So in this case, alphabetically, I'm using English in the United States for this example. That's my culture setting for my Windows machine. So in this case, person 1 is in fact less than person 2 because alphabetically, Carol Kleckner comes before Don Kiley. So if that is true, in other words, if compare returns a number that is less than 0, then this overall expression is true and this statement will be displayed. So pretty easy to do. And then you can also use the equals method in order to compare two values. It returns true if the strings are equal and false if they're not equal. If you don't care about their relative inequality, like if one is less than the other, all you care about is whether or not they're equal, then you can use the equals method. And in this case, the equals method is going to return a false value here because person 1, person 2 are not equal. I have the negate operator there. So in this case, because these are not equal, this overall expression is going to end up being true and this line of code will execute. Okay, but again, keep in mind that alphabetical order varies from culture to culture. The comparison that equal performs is case sensitive and culture insensitive, meaning that it's going to return the same results whether the computer is set for English or German. The comparison that compare performs is culture specific. So when you're using these methods, particularly of the strings, you need to be aware of how the method behaves in light of different cultural differences. Okay, and then there is the compare to method. So to use this method to compare two strings, you call the compare to method of the first string. So now you immediately know that this is an instance method because it requires an instance, a non-null instance of this person object, which happens to be a string. And then all you need to do to pass to it is the other string that you want to compare it to. So this is going to compare the string that's person 1 to the string that's person 2. Otherwise, the values that are returned by compare to are the same as compare. So if person 1 is less than person 2, negative number, equal, there's 0, greater than, it's a positive number. Okay, I'll go ahead and press F5 and run this code. And I'll select J to use the string methods. And here you can see, first person is Don Kiley, first person is Carol Kleckner. That's not the beginning of it. Okay, here it is. The string Carol Kleckner is less than the string Don Kiley. Well, good. C# and .NET can sort things. Carol Kleckner does not equal the string Don Kiley. Okay. And then Carol Kleckner is less than the string Don Kiley. So these are essentially identical, but this one was using the static method of the string object, and this is using an instance method of a string. Okay, so really to drive home that point, make sure you understand how this example is different from this. The main thing is that this is an instance method of a particular object, whereas the other two are static methods of the string object. So you need to definitely understand that distinction because you're going to encounter it a lot in C# programming and you need to be able to handle it. Okay, so now let's talk about searching in strings. You can use the starts with, ends with, contains, and index of methods in order to test for the existence of a string within another string. You call each of these as instance methods of the first string and pass the second string as a parameter, as we did with compare to in the previous code that I just showed you. Okay, so the first three methods return true if the second string is found in the first string. That starts with, ends with, and contains. And then index of returns a zero-based integer representing the starting point of the second string in the first string. So you can already probably guess that there's a lot of overlap in these methods, the different scenarios that they support. Often you want to use exactly one of them because it fits exactly what you want, but sometimes you can substitute another one and make it work. Generally, if you're not using the right method for the particular task you're trying to accomplish, you're having to write a little bit of extra code. Nothing too complex, but that's kind of a big warning sign that maybe you're not using the right method. Okay, so I'm still using person 1 and person 2. Person 1, recall, is Carol Kleckner. Person 2 is Don Kiley. Okay, so person 1, I'm using the instance method to see if it starts with this string, Carol. And it does, so that's going to return true. And this line of code will execute. And then I can also use the ends with method. Again, on person 1, that's Carol Kleckner. It does, in fact, end with NER. That returns true, and this code executes as well. And then you can use contains to just see if Don appears anywhere within the string. You don't care where. You just want to know if DON, capital DON, appears within that string. And if it does, returns true, and this statement executes. And in fact it does, because the second person is Don Kiley. And then you can use the index of method in order not just to find out, true or false if the string appears, but actually get its location within the string. Okay, and in this case, Don does appear in that string, so this overall expression, comparing it to 0, returns true as well. All right, I'll run this again, see how that code did. It's J again. And here are the results. So all of those expressions return true. So I got 4 different console.writeLine statements. First person is Carol Kleckner, second person is Don Kiley, and then the rest of them. Okay, so it's really easy to search within strings as well. But wait, there's more. You can also modify strings. In this case, you want to use the insert, remove, and replace instance methods to modify the contents of a string. And hopefully by now it should make sense that you want to use instance methods because you're actually making a change within a string. So you need a string to be working on. This is not something just generically that you can do with the string object. Okay, but the thing to remember about these methods is that they don't actually change the strings that they operate on. Instead, they perform the operation on the string that you specify, and then return a new string that you can save to a variable or display to the user in some way. Make some use of it. Okay, so first up is the insert statement. So here I have console.writeLine, person1.insert, and then you need to specify where you want to insert the first string. And I'm using person1.length, so it's going to add it to the end of the string. So just keep in mind that this is a zero-based parameter for the location. And then the second statement here, insert statement, because I'm passing a 0 there, this is going to insert the second person is space at the beginning of the person2 string. And in this case, I'm just using them directly within a console.writeLine method. And it's important to understand that these statements are not going to change person1 and person2. So that's why I have the console.writeLine down here, displaying what the current values of person1 and person2 are. Okay, I can run that. And J again. And this time I'll keep it open, make it a little bit easier. And here are those statements. Carol Kleckner is the first person, and then the second person is Don Kiley. I inserted a string at the end of the first string and inserted this string at the beginning of the second string. And then as you can see here, person 1 is still Carol Kleckner, person 2 is still Don Kiley. The values of person 1 and person 2 did not change. All right, then we have the remove method that lets you remove all characters between two positions. This method has two overloads or versions that take different parameters. The first version that I've highlighted here takes a single parameter, which is an index position. This version of the method is going to remove all characters from that position to the end of the string. And then the second version here takes two parameters. This form of the method is going to remove all of the characters from the first position through the second position. So you have a lot of flexibility. Okay, and if I go back to my results, you can see that I stripped off all but the first 5 characters here. So from the 5th character, keep in mind that it's a 0-based index. Everything else was stripped off. And here I removed some characters in the middle of the string, and I'm left with Donley. Then there's also a replace method here. This has two overloaded versions. The first version takes as parameters 2 char values. This method replaces all instances of the first character with the second character. And then the second version, the second overloaded version of the replace, takes as parameters 2 strings. This version of the method replaces all instances of the first string with the second string. And that's the version that I'm using here in this code. And here I'm replacing the name of one author with the other, and then replacing the word is with a colon. If I come back over here to my results, we have right here the first person is now shown as Don Kiley, used to be Carol Kleckner, and person 1 is still Carol Kleckner. I haven't changed that string. And then I've replaced in this one the is, space is actually, with a colon. All right, then another common thing that you'll need to deal with is leading and trailing spaces. And for that, you can use the trim method. So this is going to remove all of the leading and trailing spaces. It's not going to remove any spaces that are between words. So what it's going to do is I'm using this on person 1, which is Carol Kleckner with a bunch of leading spaces and trailing spaces. It's going to leave behind Carol space Kleckner. So it's all of the leading and trailing spaces. But if I just want to get rid of the spaces at the beginning, I can use trim start. And if I just want to get rid of the spaces at the end, I can use trim end. So here's those results. So person trimmed all is Carol Kleckner, and I included quotes in the console.write line so you can see the spacing. Trimmed all start is Don Kiley, and there you can see that it only trimmed the spaces at the start. And trim end left the spaces at the start and got rid of the spaces at the end. Next up is the pad left and pad right methods. You can use this to add either white space or a particular character to the beginning or end of a string. The first parameter that you pass to this specifies the new length of the string, which is going to determine the number of padding characters based on what the current length of the string is. And then the second parameter specifies the character that you want to pad with. If you don't pass the second parameter, then the method is going to pad the string with a space. Okay, so in this case, I'm just passing a number there, so it's going to make the entire string 20 characters. And here I'm padding left 20 characters, but this time I'm padding with a dash. And then I can do the same basic thing with pad right. This will pad right with spaces. This will pad right with dashes. All right, so there you can see. All right, so here you can see the results. Here's the first one. Person 1 is Carol Kleckner, and if we counted those characters, there should be 20 of them there. And that's padding left with spaces. Here it's padding left with dashes. Here it's padding right with spaces, and padding right with dashes. Very straightforward. And then there's 2 upper and 2 lower methods. So this is going to convert all the characters to upper or to lowercase. And there's the results. Carol Kleckner is all capitals. Person 2 is now all lowercase. So hopefully you're starting to get a sense of just how powerful and useful the string manipulation features of C# and the .NET Framework are. Perl is still the reigning champ among programming languages for working with strings, but C# has pretty much everything you need to do whatever you need to do with strings. Okay, there's still more. You can extract strings with the substring method. So this is going to extract a part of a string, the part that you define. So the first parameter that is passed to this, I only have one parameter there, is going to be the zero-based index position that represents the start of the string that you want to retrieve. And then the second optional parameter specifies the length of the string that you want to retrieve. If you don't pass the second parameter, then the method is going to retrieve the part starting with the index through the end of the string. All right, so here I have some sentences, a little bit more text. So I'm going to grab everything from position 20. Remember, it's zero-based. Here I'm going to grab the character at position 20 because I specify I only want one character. And the results of that is right here. So here's everything from position 20 forward. And here is the character at position 20. Now, a nice thing about this is that sometimes you don't know exactly where you want to start retrieving the information. So you can use the index of method here and pass that as the parameter for the location where you want to start extracting the string. So I want to extract everything to the right of the colon in this second sentence. So I use the index of, which returns the zero-based index of the colon, and I know that I have a space there, and I don't want to include the colon itself, so I add 2 to that position and extract the string from there to the end of the string. And that's why I get Don Kiley back. Or if I just want 3 characters, then I just get Don here. So you can combine these methods in very powerful ways in order to do anything you need. And this is a very common sort of thing. Because a lot of times you'll be working with dynamic strings, you won't know exactly, it'll be a dynamic thing where you won't know exactly which string you're going to be searching for at runtime, and so you can do all of this dynamically. All right, and then the last one I want to talk about is the split method. This is really nice. Some very powerful features with this. What split does is it lets you retrieve multiple parts of a string. The method takes as a parameter an array containing the characters used as delimiters or separators. And then the method returns an array containing the parts of the string that are separated by the delimiter characters that you list in the array that you pass to the method call. And just keep in mind, an array is a data type that contains multiple pieces of data, usually of the same type. So here's some code that shows that off. So I have a string of persons. So I have Carol Kleckner, comma, space, Don Kiley. And I could have more comma delimited items. I declare a string array. Those square brackets on the string type name there just means that I want this to be an array. And then I also define an array of characters that are going to have all of the separators that I want to separate by. In this particular string, the only one that applies is a comma, but I'm including the / as well. So the scenario here is that I could get a string that could have either or both of those as delimiters, and as a result of the split method, it's going to look for any of those characters. Here, find a comma, and then split Carol Kleckner into one array element and Don Kiley into the other array element. So I have this persons object. I call the split method on it. It's an instance method because it operates on a string. I pass in that array of characters, of separator characters, and then people, this array here, is populated, in this case, with 2 values. One has the name Carol Kleckner, and the other has the name Don Kiley. And there you can see the results there. The first person is Carol Kleckner. The second person is Don Kiley. And this is just the notation for reading the different elements of an array. Zero-based elements, So the first item in the array is going to be Carol Kleckner, people of 0, you can say. And then I'm also trimming that value as well.